It was a cold, gray morning when Claire first noticed it. The chill of early November had crept into her old Victorian townhouse despite the clanking efforts of the ancient radiator system. She padded across the wooden floor in her wool socks, hair still damp from her shower, and stopped short in the doorway of the bathroom. There, in the white porcelain sink, sat a single tooth. At first, she thought it was a piece of soap, or maybe a pebble from the backyard that had stuck to her slipper the night before and been rinsed loose. But when she leaned closer, a shiver ran down her spine. It was unmistakable, a human tooth, off-white, slightly yellowed, with a dull root and no signs of decay. It looked real, old but intact. Claire blinked, then reached down and touched it. Smooth, cold, too real. She stood for a long minute, just staring at the thing, her breath fogging the mirror behind her. The bathroom smelled faintly of mint toothpaste and lavender soap. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place, except that tooth. Claire wasn't the type to panic. She was practical, methodical. A project manager by trade, she organized life by spreadsheets and schedules. So she picked it up, using a square of toilet paper, dropped it into a Ziploc bag, and set it aside to throw out later. Maybe it was a prank. She had friends with strange senses of humor, or maybe, though it seemed impossible, it had been flushed up from the pipes, some remnant from the long history of the house, a century of tenants and unknown repairs. She went to work, came home, forgot about it. The next morning, there were two, one in the sink, one on the tiled floor near the base of the toilet. Claire stared at them, heart sinking. They were nearly identical to the first, small molars, worn but intact, two intact. No blood, no signs of damage, just teeth. She didn't tell anyone. Who would she tell? And what would she say? That she was finding teeth in her bathroom. It sounded ridiculous. Maybe they were from an animal, she tried to tell herself. But deep down, she knew better. These weren't dog teeth or cat teeth. They were human. On the third day, she cleaned the bathroom from top to bottom. Bleach, disinfectant, even scrubbed the ceiling tiles just in case. The smell of chemicals clung to her hands for hours, but by nightfall, the space sparkled. No chance anything could be hiding there. Still, when she returned the next morning, there were three. This time, they were lined up along the edge of the sink, as if someone or something had placed them there deliberately. Claire stood in the doorway, trembling. It was no longer a question of coincidence. Someone was putting them there, but how? The doors were locked, the windows sealed. There were no signs of entry, no sounds in the night. She began setting up her phone in the bathroom at night, hoping to catch some footage. But every morning, the phone showed nothing but still darkness, no movement, no sound, no intruder. Yet the teeth kept coming. By the end of the week, there were over a dozen, some in the sink, some on the floor, one nestled inside the roll of toilet paper like a gift. She kept them in the same Ziploc bag, now heavy and clinking. Her hand shook when she held it. She didn't throw it away. She wasn't sure why. Sleep became hard. Every creak of the house made her flinch. She left the lights on in the bathroom, hoping that whatever was doing this would be discouraged by the brightness. It made no difference. The teeth still appeared, silent and secretive. On the 9th night, Claire sat awake in her living room, staring at the bathroom door like it might swing open on its own. The air in the house was still, thick. There was a feeling, something beyond fear, something closer to pressure, like the house was holding its breath. She stood finally and walked down the hallway. The bathroom light was on, casting a pale yellow glow onto the floor. The door was open, empty. Nothing but tile and porcelain and that familiar mint lavender scent. But then she saw the mirror, not the glass itself, but what clung to the edge of it, just the faintest smear, like something wet had touched it. She leaned closer. Her reflection stared back, anxious and pale. She reached out and wiped the smear away with her sleeve, and there, on the small shelf beneath the mirror, was another tooth. This one was different. It was longer, sharper, a canine, stained and chipped. It sat alone, as if watching her. She turned and left the bathroom without touching it. By the 12th day, Claire had stopped sleeping altogether. Her eyes were bloodshot, nerves frayed. Her co-workers noticed but didn't press her. She was jumpy, distracted. She thought about calling someone. A priest, maybe. A plumber, at least. But what would she say? "Hi, I'm finding teeth in my bathroom every morning, and I don't know where they're coming from." She began to wonder if she was losing her mind. Maybe she was sleepwalking. Maybe she was pulling her own teeth out in the night. She checked her mouth every morning, every evening, counted them, ran her tongue over the gums obsessively, but nothing ever changed. Her teeth were intact. Her mind, maybe less so. The bag of teeth grew heavier. She kept it in a drawer now, hidden beneath old towels. It rattled softly when she opened it. There were so many. One morning, she found a wisdom tooth sitting in her coffee mug. That was the moment she truly felt it. Something watching, not just a presence, but attention. Like the house itself had turned its gaze on her. Every time she walked past the bathroom, her skin crawled. She began keeping the door shut. Then she duct taped it, stuffed a towel into the crack at the bottom. It didn't help. The next morning, the tape was peeled back. The towel moved. And there, on the doorknob, balanced like a grim prize, was a tooth. The smell began soon after, faint at first, metallic, sour, like old pennies and rotting meat. She scrubbed the drains, poured bleach, called an exterminator who found nothing, no signs of rats or vermin, no clogs, just a clean, normal bathroom. But the smell stayed. The mirror, too, had changed. It always seemed fogged now, even when the room was dry. Her reflection shimmered at the edges like heat rising from asphalt. And sometimes, though she tried to convince herself otherwise, she saw movement behind it. Just a flicker, a twitch, a shadow that didn't belong. On the 15th night, Claire set up 3 cameras, one facing the mirror, one on the floor, one hidden behind the sink. She checked them hourly, watching the feeds on her laptop in the living room. At 3:13 a.m., the screen facing the mirror went black. She ran to the bathroom, heart pounding, but the door was locked from the inside. She stood outside, her breath shallow, hand trembling on the knob. Then slowly, it creaked open. The lights were off. The room smelled stronger than ever, iron and something sweet, like old fruit. She flicked the switch. The lights buzzed, flickered, then came on. The mirror was clean, no fog, no smear. But inside the sink were 5 teeth, fresh, still wet. She backed away. From that night on, she stopped entering the bathroom at all. She used the guest bath downstairs, avoided the hallway, kept the upstairs door closed and locked, the key hidden, but the teeth found their way out. She found one under her pillow, one inside her shoe, one buried in the dirt of her potted plant. The mirror in her bedroom began to fog at random despite no humidity. She removed it, locked it in a closet. Still, she caught glimpses, just flashes, of shapes where reflections should be. By the end of the third week, Claire was barely functional. She stopped going to work. Her phone rang with increasing frequency, co-workers, friends, voicemails she didn't listen to. The house was too loud with silence. Every wall seemed to creak. Every pipe moaned like something deep inside was shifting. And still, the teeth kept coming. They weren't all the same anymore. Some were small, like a child's. Some were blackened, rotted. One had a gold cap. Another was cracked in half, jagged at the root. Claire stopped collecting them. She let them lie where they fell, a trail of bone and enamel across her home. It wasn't until the 25th day that she heard it. A soft sound, a sound that made her blood freeze. Something behind the mirror, something chewing. Claire's world had narrowed to the confines of her home, each room a prison cell echoing with the clink of teeth. The once comforting creaks of the old house now sounded like whispers of unseen intruders. She moved through her days in a haze, the line between waking and dreaming blurred by sleepless nights and the relentless presence of the teeth. The bag of teeth had grown heavier, its contents clattering ominously with each addition. She had stopped counting them after the 50th, the sheer volume too overwhelming to comprehend. They appeared in increasingly bizarre places, embedded in the soap bar, nestled among the bristles of her hairbrush, even suspended in the ice cubes of her freezer. Desperation drove her to seek help. She contacted a local priest, Father Thomas, who agreed to bless the house. He moved through the rooms, sprinkling holy water and murmuring prayers, his brow furrowed in concern. But as he approached the bathroom, he hesitated, the air thickening with an oppressive weight. He turned to Claire, his face pale. "There's something wrong here," he said. She nodded, unable to articulate the dread that had taken root in her soul. Father Thomas completed the blessing but left quickly, offering a strained smile and a promise to pray for her. That night, the teeth doubled. Claire's isolation deepened. Friends stopped calling. Her workplace considered her on indefinite leave, and her neighbors avoided eye contact. The house became a tomb, each room a mausoleum of her former life. She took to sleeping in the living room, the bathroom door barricaded with furniture. Still, the teeth found her. One morning, she awoke to find a trail of teeth leading from the bathroom to her makeshift bed. They were arranged meticulously, forming a path that ended at her pillow. At the center lay a single, pristine incisor, gleaming in the morning light. She screamed, the sound raw and primal, echoing through the empty house. Determined to uncover the source, Claire purchased a thermal imaging camera and set it up facing the bathroom mirror. She monitored the feed obsessively, eyes glued to the screen. For days, nothing happened. Then on the 7th night, the temperature around the mirror plummeted. The screen flickered, and a distorted figure appeared, its form shifting and writhing. The sound of chewing filled the room, wet and rhythmic. Claire watched in horror as the figure reached into its mouth, extracted a tooth, and placed it on the sink. She recoiled, bile rising in her throat. The figure turned toward the camera, its face a grotesque amalgamation of features, eyes hollow and mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. The screen went black. Claire destroyed the camera, smashing it against the floor until it was nothing but shards. But the damage was done. The image of the figure was etched into her mind, a permanent scar. She knew then that this was no ordinary haunting. Something ancient and malevolent had taken residence in her home, feeding off her fear. In a final act of defiance, Claire decided to confront the entity. She removed the barricade from the bathroom door and stepped inside. The air was thick, the stench of decay overpowering. The mirror was fogged, but as she approached, it cleared, revealing her reflection and something else. Behind her stood the figure, its grin wider, eyes gleaming with malice. She turned, but the room was empty. When she looked back at the mirror, the figure was gone. In its place was a message scrawled in condensation, "We are not done." Claire fled the house, never to return. She checked into a motel on the outskirts of town, hoping distance would sever the connection. But the teeth followed. They appeared on her pillow, in her shoes, even in her food. The entity had marked her, and there was no escape. Her story ends here, a cautionary tale of curiosity and the horrors that lurk just beyond the veil. The house remains, its windows dark and uninviting, a silent sentinel to the terror within. And sometimes, if you listen closely, you can hear the faint sound of chewing echoing through the night. Claire didn't remember falling asleep. It was the kind of sleep that crashes over exhaustion like a wave, leaving no memory of dreams or time. She awoke in a strange bed, wrapped in stiff white sheets, sunlight slanting through a cracked window blind. For a moment, she thought she'd escaped, that maybe she'd made it out, outrun the thing that had attached itself to her life like a leech. But as her eyes adjusted to the light, the room came into focus. This wasn't a motel. This was sterile, impersonal. The muted colors, the faint antiseptic scent. A hospital, or something like one. She sat up, body sore and slow, her throat dry like she'd swallowed dust. There was a call button beside the bed, but she didn't press it. Instead, she looked around. A small television was mounted, the upper corner turned off. No one was in the hallway beyond the open door. She swung her legs over the side and stood. She was in a psychiatric facility, the kind where people ended up when the world thought they needed to be quiet for a while. The memories came in fragments. A woman screaming in the middle of a road, barefoot and wild-eyed, a security officer's hand on her shoulder, a man in scrubs saying words like trauma, delusions, unresponsive. She had been admitted 3 weeks ago. They told her she hadn't spoken since. Claire moved to the bathroom, small and windowless, and stood before the mirror. A normal mirror, clean, reflecting only what it should. She stared into her eyes, pale blue, haunted, but hers. She brushed her hair back with trembling fingers and smiled. Her gums ached. The smile faltered. She leaned closer, opening her mouth. Nothing seemed missing, but she could feel it beneath the surface, a tightness, a pressure. She pressed a finger against her top gum and felt a sharp point under the skin. Not a cavity, not an ulcer. Another tooth coming in. She staggered back from the mirror, her breath catching. The sterile air felt too thick. She couldn't breathe. She rushed to the door and leaned out into the hallway. A nurse looked up from the station. "I need to speak to someone," Claire said, her voice dry from disuse. The nurse nodded. "Of course, Miss Wallace. The doctor will be in shortly." She waited in the room, hands trembling in her lap. When the doctor came, He had the placid smile of someone trained to handle hysteria. She told him everything about the house, the teeth, the mirror, the sound of chewing. He nodded, made notes, asked questions. "You believe something was putting the teeth there," he said. "Number I know it was. It wasn't human." He tapped his pen against his clipboard. "You haven't found any new teeth here, have you?" Claire shook her head, but the pressure in her gums pulsed in response. The days passed slowly. She went through the routines, took her medication, pretended to improve. But every night she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Her mouth ached. Some nights she heard faint scratching from the walls. Some nights she woke with a tooth clenched in her hand. They weren't hers. She knew that now. They never had been. On the 7th night, she woke to find a row of them placed carefully along the edge of the window. She said nothing. The mirror in the bathroom fogged every morning now. The staff blamed the plumbing. But each time it cleared, Claire saw more than just her reflection. There were eyes behind her, hundreds of them, blinking slowly like mollusks emerging from darkness. She no longer looked into mirrors. One afternoon, she sat alone in the common room, sketching. She'd taken to drawing the thing behind the mirror. Not its full form, she couldn't capture that, but fragments, teeth, fingers, eyes like pits. The other patients avoided her, except one. Her name was Mary, a pale, bird-like woman with a permanent frown. One day, she sat beside Claire and whispered, "It followed you here, didn't it?" Claire froze. "You see it, too?" Mary nodded. "It comes for the ones who are hollowed out. It fills the spaces. You let it in." "How do I get rid of it?" Mary smiled with no joy. "You don't. You just learn to feed it." That night, Claire dreamed of bone. Not skeletons, but white towers made of molars, canines, incisors. An entire landscape of enamel. In the sky above, a mouth stretched across the clouds, open and waiting. She woke with blood on her pillow, a new tooth in her hand, not hers. They discharged her 2 weeks later. She was stabilized, no longer a threat to herself or others. They gave her a bus ticket and a month's worth of medication. She didn't go back to her house. She'd sold it to the bank. It stood empty now. The neighbors said it was cursed. Children dared each other to throw rocks at its windows. She moved into a small apartment downtown, cheap and anonymous, no mirrors. She taped cardboard over the bathroom one. She brushed her teeth with the lights off, but the chewing followed. It grew louder, closer. She could hear it behind the walls. At night, she pressed her ear to the drywall and heard it, the moist grind of molars on something soft. Slow, patient. It never left. The teeth kept appearing, one on her doorstep, one in her cereal, one under the skin of her thigh, just beneath the surface. She dug it out with a knife, sobbing. Something was building. One morning she woke to find them arranged in a circle on the floor around her bed. Hundreds of them. Old, new, rotten, gold-capped milk teeth, fangs. Some still glistened with moisture. In the center of the circle, a shard of glass, a mirror fragment. Claire didn't touch it. She knelt beside it, heart pounding, and stared. A reflection bloomed inside the shard. Not hers. Its. A face like clay, stretched thin, a smile made entirely of mismatched teeth. It mouthed something, not words, just sounds. Chewing. The ground beneath the shard began to crack, not the wood floor, but the world itself, splintering, as if reality were a mirror breaking. Claire backed away. The shard pulsed. Teeth rose from it like flowers from soil, blooming outward in a spiral. Each vibrated with sound. The chewing was no longer distant. It was in her ears, inside her head. She collapsed, clutching her temples. Then silence. When she opened her eyes, the apartment was gone. She stood in a vast expanse, dim and endless. The sky above was black, but not empty, filled with the slow movement of things too massive to comprehend. Beneath her feet, a floor of bone, white and endless. Something moved on the horizon, a shape, not walking, sliding. She turned to run, but found herself rooted in place. The chewing returned, louder now, constant. A rhythm. It spoke to her through the sound. "We are here. We are always here. We feed. And you," Claire screamed. The ground cracked beneath her. She fell into darkness. She awoke in her apartment again. Sunlight through the curtains, birds outside. The teeth were gone. So was the shard. She walked through the apartment, silent. No sound, no chewing. The air was clean, normal. For the first time in months, she thought maybe it was over. A week passed, peaceful, silent. She slept, ate, showered. One morning, she received a letter, no stamp, no return address. Inside, a single tooth, her own. She ran to the bathroom, tore the cardboard from the mirror. There was no reflection, just teeth, rows of them stretching into darkness. A mouth without a face, and from the depths, the chewing began again. Slow, familiar. Claire stared, transfixed. She smiled, and one by one her teeth began to fall out.